So, welcome to another week of the Advent Crew. We're so glad that you could be here with us. Um, this week we're talking about joy. And obviously, one of the best parts of the Christmas season is all the preparation and planning that goes into it. Even in a year like this, when all of our plans kind of get tossed around. Don, how is all of your Christmas prep coming?
It's slow going. We have done most of the shopping on Amazon this year. But, it's just the wrapping thing, right? It just takes forever, and then we have to send it all out west to our son and daughter-in-law and their family. So yeah, it's going slow. We're getting close.
Yeah. How about the rest of you guys? How's it coming?
Well, we're going to be alone for Christmas for the first time ever. All our kids are going to be gone. But I was able to enjoy a great weekend with my brother and sister, and it was the first time I got to see my brother since he'd had a stroke, and it was a wonderful Christmas. We had a great time. So,
see, you're starting it early. I like it. Yeah, definitely. Well, as we move into our story for this week, we have questions that we had listed in our Advent guide that were about Elizabeth and Zechariah, which is a wonderful story in the New Testament. And we will link in the comments below to where you can find a copy of that story in your Jesus Storybook Bible. But the story, The Son of Laughter, is actually about Abraham and Sarah. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's start off with, Mark, what are Abraham and Sarah waiting for?
Well, obviously they're waiting for a baby because, after God shows him the sky and says, count the stars, that's how many. Abraham's going, wait a minute, I don't have any kids right now. And their ages also are a part of that, where they're like, what do you mean we're going to have kids? So they're waiting for that. And the response of laughter, I think, is, I guess it's appropriate. I think God probably, I'm not sure that was lack of faith. It was just like, really? You're going to do this? So, yeah, I think that's what they're waiting for.
Definitely. Yeah. Oh, man. Anyone else have anything to chime in with there? I mean, it is kind of hilarious to imagine. I'm sure they didn't expect that God was going to craft this great plan through them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like how the stories go together, though, of Abraham and Sarah and Zechariah and Elizabeth, and that it is very connected, that they're both waiting for their babies. They're both older, and it just seems just completely impossible. There's just it's not a chance. Like, it's just laughable. Not going to happen.
Exactly. And I think there's a lot to be said for celebrating Advent and the waiting in the midst of, just expecting the impossible. And to see that fulfilled in Jesus even. I mean, I don't think anyone expected him to come like he did.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But obviously, our God is a God of the impossible. And that's definitely a theme of this week's stories for sure. Mm-hmm. So, Betsy, you are always so great with our questions about obedience. Where do you see Abraham and Sarah obeying in this story? And all of you are still going to have to answer too, but we'll start with Betsy.
Kind of like with David, that I think what we keep seeing with obedience is that it's the small and the everyday, and they're already out where God has asked them to be. And even for Sarah, obedience looks so different than Abraham's because she's not seeing all the visions and, necessarily hearing the voice like he is, but she's still there. She's just being loving towards him, and he's being loving towards his family, and they're just doing the best they can every day. And there's a long time between God telling them one thing and then they have to go do it every day for years and years and years. So to me, that's such just that long period of waiting, like you just said, it's an incredible reminder to me that one message, whatever message God has given me, is enough. And just to be faithful with that every day. And honestly, that's hard enough for me. We have such a wealth of having the scriptures and being able to reference all of the stories of the Bible. What a gift, but just being faithful to it every day is enough.
Yeah, it's a really good point.
Very good point.
Thinking about just even in the short term, from when God spoke this to Abraham, and the very moment that Sarah experienced, be it a kick in her womb, or she woke up with morning sickness, or whatever it may have been, it was in that small time frame where they're wondering, God, are you going to come through? Is this promise true? And it was like they're both anticipating that moment when finally she gets up and she's throwing up, or she's like, ow, that kind of moment. Like, God, he's going to come through. This is awesome. Thank you so much for validating that you are real and you are at work. And I don't know, for me, it was like, okay, we're going to trust you in this, God. We know that you have our future in mind. And even though this is going to be something beyond what we could ever conceive ourselves, you're going to pull it off because you've done this to us.
Yeah. And one thing that struck me really is looking back at that culture and that time, a woman who does not bring babies is a shame in their culture. She's like, something is very wrong with you. You're cursed. God doesn't love you, blah, blah, blah. And this is where their obedience came back in, both Sarah and Elizabeth, where they kept their faith in God. They kept their joy of God will come through this, will come through this. And when he came in, they were like, it's just the joy of having that. That also struck me, like, how would you feel if you were in that spot? And being obedient every single day, like Betsy has said, and keep that joy in your mind and your heart, and just keep your obedience and your faith in God. And it's not easy.
No, definitely not. Yeah.
I think a little bit of doubt is still okay too. I mean,
Correct.
their laughter, their sense of this, how can you possibly make this happen? I mean, it's okay to feel that way. God still came through for them. So I think when we feel guilty sometimes for a little bit of doubt, I think God will still come through for us as well.
True.
Yeah. And I think it was such a gift that God gave them, even that physical manifestation of his plan, that they were able to maybe feel the kick of the baby, or yeah. And you see, I mean, that even in the story of Elizabeth and Zechariah, that there is punishment that comes for his doubting and not believing. But at the same time, like, that's all a part of the story that God is weaving in their lives, and he uses that, I think, to bolster our faith today. So how do you guys see this story speaking to your life, even this week, and as we're looking at the theme of joy, celebrating Advent?
I always looked at this way, that God is faithful. He will come through. He's the God of the impossible. And just walking every day in his word, and keeping our eyes focused on him. It's not easy to go through the trials and the difficulties, and just even a quick laughter, as Mark have said. Really, it's going to happen, but here we go. You keep your eyes focused. He's the God of impossible, and go ahead and keep your eyes on him. And obedience is a joy, brings joy to, because it brings God in the midst of the trouble, and he will come through.
Definitely. Yeah.
I really appreciate when God gives us small signs of his work in our lives, because it's in those moments that we experience the greatest joy that God is faithfully at work behind the scenes, when we're waiting on maybe the big answers to those questions that we've laid before him. I think for Abraham and Sarah, just that kick or that morning sickness was that little sign saying, I am faithful to you. I'm gonna respond. I'm gonna show you that at work. And it's like, it gives you that joy that God is behind the scenes working. For me, that's been, I think, something that my wife and I can look back on over and over again, how God just shows up in big ways, and experience just the great joy that he is faithful.
Yeah,
definitely.
I feel like I've lived this in a big way, in the fact that I'm still alive, that God did the impossible in my life. And so the thing I try to get out of it is to not miss the small things. Look for those small things that God puts in my life to show me that he's still working. So yeah, it's a good story.
Definitely. I think even in seasons where we're waiting on something, that having those small things to cling to help us kind of keep tracking and keep being faithful. Definitely. Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for joining us and having these conversations. I'm excited Next week, we'll have our last week of Advent, our last discussion together, looking at the Advent theme of love. And yeah, just in a season where, like you said, Mark, my Christmas is going to look different and much more alone than before. Like, it's just so great that we have this community and this chance to connect online together. So thank you all for being a part of it. And thank you to our Calvary family. Send us a comment and just let us know that you're watching. We'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you.